Dark matter often sounds confusing because the name suggests something strange or unknowable. In reality, the idea grows out of very ordinary observations about motion and gravity. Nothing about it starts with mystery for its own sake. It begins with careful measurement and a simple question: does what we see account for how things move? Consider a galaxy as a vast system of stars orbiting a common center. Gravity provides the attraction that keeps those stars bound together. By measuring how fast stars move at different distances from the center, it becomes possible to estimate how much mass must be present. This approach works reliably for familiar systems, such as planets around the sun. When astronomers applied the same reasoning to galaxies, something unexpected appeared. Stars far from the center moved much faster than a visible matter could justify. The stars' gas and dust that telescopes revealed did not provide enough gravitational influence to explain the motion. The galaxy behaved as though it contained much more mass than could be seen. At first, this seemed like a measurement problem. Instruments improved, data sets expanded. The result remained. The same mismatch appeared across many galaxies, and later in large collections of galaxies. Motion consistently pointed to additional mass spread well beyond the bright regions. At that point, the issue could not be dismissed. Either gravity behaved differently on large scales, or a large amount of matter influenced motion without interacting with light. Dark matter enters as a name for that missing influence. The term does not describe what it is made of. It describes how it behaves. It refers to whatever produces gravitational effects without emitting or absorbing light. This way of thinking fits naturally within physics. Physical existence does not depend on visibility. It depends on measurable influence. Long before air was understood, its effects on motion and pressure made its presence undeniable. Dark matter occupies a similar logical role, though on cosmic scales. Evidence extends beyond galaxy rotation. Light passing near massive clusters bends more than visible matter alone predicts. The large-scale structure of the universe forms in ways that require additional gravitational influence early in cosmic history. Each observation points to unseen mass shaping space and motion. A deeper question follows naturally. Does this unseen influence come from a new kind of matter, or does it signal a need to revise how gravity behaves across vast distances? Both ideas aim to explain the same observations. Understanding dark matter begins with accepting that gravity responds to mass whether that mass shines or not. Following that influence carefully leads deeper into how matter, gravity, and the structure of space itself fit together. Following that influence leads straight into how dark matter becomes more than a label and turns into a measurable part of modern physics. One of the clearest moments came in the 1970s through the work of astronomer Vera Rubin, working with Kent Ford. Rubin studied how stars move within spiral galaxies. According to gravitational reasoning that works everywhere else, stars farther from the center should move more slowly, much like distant planets around the sun. What Rubin found refused to follow that expectation. The outer stars moved at nearly the same speed as inner ones. The motion traced a flat curve rather than a declining one. That result carried a sharp implications. Either gravity changed its behavior at galactic scales, or far more mass surrounded the galaxy than telescopes revealed. Rubin's careful measurements, repeated across many galaxies, pushed the idea of unseen mass from speculation into necessity. From there, the concept grew stronger through independent methods. One of the most striking involves how massive objects bend light. Einstein's description of gravity predicts that mass curves the paths of light traveling nearby. Astronomers use this effect, called gravitational lensing, to map where mass resides. In the early 2000s, observations of a system known as the Bullet Cluster, analyzed by Douglas Clow and collaborators, showed something remarkable. Ordinary matter, visible as hot gas, slowed and piled up after a collision between two galaxy clusters. The gravitational influence traced by lensing appeared somewhere else entirely. The dominant mass passed through with little interaction. That separation mattered. It showed that the unseen mass behaved differently from familiar matter. It clumped gravitationally, yet barely interacted through collisions or light. Gravity revealed its presence even where visible matter lagged behind. These observations point toward what dark matter represents at a fundamental level. Dark matter functions as a source of gravity that interacts very weakly, if at all, through other known forces. It contributes mass energy to space, shapes motion, and influences how structures form, while remaining largely indifferent to light, heat, and ordinary collisions. This challenges everyday assumptions deeply. In daily life, matter announces itself through sight, touch, resistance, or heat. Mass seems inseparable from substance you can point to. On cosmic scales, that intuition breaks down. Motion responds to gravity alone, not to visibility. A star follows the gravitational landscape laid out by all mass present, regardless of whether that mass glows. Physicists model dark matter using this principle. Instead of asking what it looks like, they ask how much gravitational influence appears necessary at each location to account for observed motion and lensing. Computer simulations then distribute dark matter in extended halos around galaxies and clusters. When these models evolve forward in cosmic time, they reproduce the large-scale structure seen in surveys, filaments, clusters, and voids arranged in a vast web. This success matters. It shows that treating dark matter as a real component of the universe leads to consistent predictions across independent observations. The same invisible mass explains galaxy rotation, cluster dynamics, lensing maps, and the growth of structure from the early universe. At the deepest level currently accessible, dark matter represents mass that participates fully in gravity while remaining largely disconnected from electromagnetic processes. It behaves as matter in the gravitational sense, contributing to how space responds and how motion unfolds, without behaving like atoms, gas, or dust. That realization reshapes how matter itself gets defined. Matter no longer requires visibility, solidity, or chemical structure. Gravitational influence becomes the defining feature. If something shapes motion persistently and consistently, physics treats it as real. This view also explains why dark matter fits naturally into descriptions of space and time. Gravity responds to energy and mass, regardless of form. Space curves, and motion responds based on total content, not on what that content looks like. Dark matter enters those equations seamlessly because gravity already accounts for unseen contributors. What remains uncertain concerns composition. Many candidates exist, ranging from new elementary particles to more complex possibilities. Experiments search for rare interactions deep underground, in particle accelerators, and through astrophysical signals. None have yet delivered a definitive answer. What remains firm lies in the gravitational evidence. Dark matter, at this stage, stands as a measured component of the universe, inferred through multiple independent techniques. It represents how much mass must exist for space, motion, and structure to behave the way observations show. Understanding it means accepting that the universe carries substance beyond what eyes and instruments tuned to light can reveal, and that gravity serves as the guide, linking the unseen to everything that moves within it. As dark matter takes its place within physical descriptions, its consequences begin to appear across many areas at the same time. Observations that once felt isolated start to support each other, and familiar ideas about matter, structure, and influence lose their apparent simplicity. The large-scale arrangement of the universe offers one of the clearest examples. Galaxies do not scatter randomly. They collect along immense filaments, surround vast empty regions, and assemble into clusters connected by long strands of mass. Early attempts to explain this structure using only visible matter ran into a timing problem. Ordinary matter, interacting strongly with radiation in the early universe, could not gather quickly enough under gravity to form the structures observed today. Introducing dark matter resolves this tension naturally. Dark matter begins clumping early, before atoms form and before light moves freely through space. It supplies gravitational wells that deepen over time. Ordinary matter later falls into these wells, cools, and forms stars and galaxies. Structure develops in a sequence that matches observation without repeated adjustments. From this perspective, galaxies appear less like independent systems and more like visible highlights tracing an underlying framework. Their shapes, motions, and distributions reflect a deeper mass arrangement that remains unseen. This leads to an unexpected reversal of intuition. Human senses treat visible matter as dominant because it announces itself. On cosmic scales, gravity responds to total mass regardless of appearance. The universe organizes itself according to what contributes gravitational influence, not according to what emits light. Time itself enters the story in a revealing way. The timeline of cosmic evolution aligns far more smoothly when dark matter is included. Small density differences present early on grow at rates consistent with observation. Galaxies form neither too early nor too late. Clusters assemble when expected. A single additional component resolves multiple chronological puzzles at once. Gravitational lensing reinforces this unified picture. Light bends when passing through regions of mass, allowing astronomers to map where gravitational influence resides. These maps repeatedly show mass distributed beyond the boundaries of visible matter. Extended halos surround galaxies and clusters, revealing smooth mass distributions without sharp edges. Here, everyday reasoning begins to fail. Mass feels naturally tied to compact objects with clear boundaries. Dark matter spreads over large regions, forming halos that resist collapse into dense structures. This distribution explains why galaxies remain bound even when their stars move rapidly. The motion reflects the presence of an extended gravitational environment rather than a concentrated core. Another tension arises from how dark matter interacts. In ordinary matter, interactions leave traces: heat, light, friction, radiation. Dark matter interacts powerfully through gravity while remaining almost indifferent to other forces. During collisions between galaxy clusters, ordinary gas slows and heats, while dark matter continues onward, detectable only through its gravitational influence. This challenges assumptions about interaction and causality. Influence often feels inseparable from exchange. Dark matter demonstrates that gravity alone suffices to connect systems and shape motion without exchanging light or heat. Causality remains intact because influence still propagates through space, even if it does so through a single channel. A broader picture emerges. The universe resembles a gravitational network in which different components participate differently. Ordinary matter interacts richly through many forces, but contributes modestly to gravity on large scales. Dark matter contributes strongly to gravity while interacting weakly otherwise. Each component shapes cosmic behavior through its own interaction profile. Early skepticism treated dark matter as a placeholder for error. Over time, mismatches appeared repeatedly and independently. Galaxy rotation, lensing, cluster dynamics, and structure formation all pointed toward the same missing contribution. Adding dark matter did not patch individual discrepancies. It revealed a shared cause. This coherence explains why dark matter remains difficult to detect directly. Instruments designed to capture light or heat cannot register something that barely engages with those processes. Its presence must be inferred through motion, lensing, and large-scale structure. Physics already relies on inference in many domains. Gravity itself announces its existence only through effects. This reliance on inference carries an important implication. The universe does not restrict itself to what human senses evolved to detect. Perception samples a narrow band of reality. Physics expands that band by following consistent effects wherever they lead, even beyond direct observation. Dark matter also reshapes how space itself is understood. Gravity links mass energy to the geometry of space-time. If most mass resides in dark matter, then large-scale curvature reflects that unseen contribution. The paths galaxies follow, the way light bends, and the formation of structure all depend on it. This places dark matter at the center rather than the margins of cosmology. The universe responds primarily to what weighs the most, not to what shines the brightest. Computer simulations highlight this point vividly. Models that include dark matter evolve into structures resembling observed surveys, complete with filaments, clusters, and voids. Models that exclude it fail in systematic ways. Structures appear late, thin, or incomplete. Each failure points back to the same missing ingredient. Viewed individually, these observations might invite separate explanations. Taken together, they form a consistent narrative. Motion, lensing, timing, and structure all trace the same gravitational influence. The meaning of dark matter extends beyond accounting for missing mass. It indicates that physical reality includes components operating outside direct detection, shaping outcomes through long-term, large-scale influence. This does not diminish ordinary matter. It places it within a wider context. Stars and planets become visible expressions of deeper gravitational organization. What shines follows what weighs. Understanding dark matter in this way changes how explanation itself works. Instead of relying on appearance, physics relies on convergence. Multiple independent measurements pointing toward the same unseen cause outweigh the absence of direct detection. Dark matter connects gravity, motion, space, and cosmic history into a unified framework. Each reinforces the others. What once appeared as scattered anomalies now reads as different perspectives on the same underlying structure. That realization carries an important implication. The universe remains intelligible even when much of it lies beyond immediate perception. Careful attention to effects leads to coherence rather than confusion. Dark matter does not sit alongside the story of the universe. It runs through it, shaping how matter gathers, how structures form, and how motion unfolds across vast distances. Understanding that thread transforms many isolated puzzles into a connected picture, revealing a universe that proves larger, yet no less ordered than it first appears. When all the pieces are viewed together, dark matter settles into a clear role rather than remaining a loose hypothesis. It provides a consistent way to understand how the universe behaves on the largest scales, tying motion, structure, and stability into a single picture supported by many observations. Galaxies rotate as they do because they sit inside extended regions of unseen mass. Clusters remain bound because additional gravitational influence surrounds them. Light bends along paths shaped by more mass than telescopes reveal. Large-scale structure forms early and grows in the right way because extra gravitational influence shapes space long before stars appear. Together, these facts reinforce one explanation. This convergence marks what physics treats as firmly established. A substantial amount of matter contributes gravitationally across the universe while remaining largely invisible to light and ordinary interactions. Its presence is inferred through motion, lensing, and structure, and those inferences agree across different methods, scales, and eras. Removing this component breaks that agreement. Including it restores consistency. What remains uncertain lies in the details rather than the existence. The exact nature of dark matter remains unknown. Its composition, internal properties, and origin resist direct detection. Experiments search for rare interactions. Observations probe subtle effects. The absence of a definitive identification sets the boundary of current knowledge. This balance between confidence and uncertainty matters. Dark matter does not represent a missing piece filled in by guesswork. It represents a component required by evidence, even as its deeper description remains incomplete. Its strength lies in how many independent observations it unifies without contradiction. Including dark matter reshapes how stability itself is understood. Systems remain intact not only because of what shines within them, but because of what weighs around them. Motion responds to total gravitational influence, not to visibility. Structure follows mass, whether that mass announces itself or not. This perspective alters how familiar scenes are interpreted. The night sky no longer appears as a collection of isolated lights scattered across emptiness. Each bright point traces a deeper gravitational environment shared with countless others. What can be seen marks only a fraction of what governs motion and form. Dark matter also clarifies why the universe remains intelligible. The same principles explain galaxies, clusters, and cosmic structure without changing rules from one scale to another. Gravity responds consistently. Motion follows predictably. Stability emerges naturally. The practical takeaway rests here. Reality extends beyond direct detection, and physics follows influence rather than appearance. Some of the most important contributors to how the universe behaves do not announce themselves through light, heat, or touch. They reveal themselves through what they shape over time. Understanding dark matter encourages a broader view of existence. What matters most is not always what stands out, but what holds everything else together. The universe evolves under the guidance of influences that operate indirectly yet persistently, shaping motion, structure, and history across vast distances. Seen this way, dark matter stops feeling distant or abstract. It becomes part of the framework that allows galaxies to form, motion to remain stable, and the universe to develop structure at all.
4 years for a degree, 2 years for a master's, years to become competent, years to master a skill, years of your life spent slowly accumulating knowledge. Satter, hold up the daily calendar. This is how long it actually takes when you know how to learn. Days, sometimes hours. Not because you're rushing, not because you're cutting corners, but because most of what fills those years isn't learning. It's waste and efficiency. Methods designed for institutions, not for actual human brains. Hey, fake! Put calendars down. Richard Feynman learned quantum electrodynamics in days.
Not years, days.
He learned Portuguese in 2 weeks. Learned to draw in months. Learned biology, computing, lockpicking, all in time frames that seemed impossible. Not because he was superhuman, not because he had a photographic memory, but because he'd figured out something fundamental. The difference between learning that takes years and learning that takes days isn't the content, it's the method. Direct address A? Right now, you probably believe that learning takes time, lots of time, that you need years to master anything substantial. That quick learning means shallow learning. And that belief, that false belief, is costing you years of your life because it's not true. Deep learning can happen fast, really fast, when you use the right methods. Lean in fees today, I'm going to show you those methods. How smart people learn in days what takes others years. Not shortcuts, not hacks, not superficial speed reading tricks. but actual, deep learning compressed into time frames you probably think are impossible. Because the methods you're using right now, the ones schools taught you, they're designed for something other than efficient learning. And once you see what they're designed for and what actually works, everything changes. I walk across stage, and let me start with a story that reveals the whole system. It's 1951. Feynman is on a ship to Brazil, 2-week voyage, and he decides, I'm going to learn Portuguese. Not, I'm going to start learning Portuguese. Not, I'm going to get familiar with Portuguese. Learn Portuguese. In 2 weeks, on a ship. Build the scene. He has some textbooks, some grammar books, and there are Portuguese speakers on the ship. That's it. 2 weeks. No classes, no formal instruction, no language lab, no apps. And by the time he arrives in Brazil, he's conversational, not fluent, not perfect, but genuinely conversational. Can have real conversations, can understand and be understood. Share the reaction. People are amazed. How did you learn Portuguese in 2 weeks? That's impossible. Languages take years to learn. And Feynman says something revealing. Languages don't take years. The methods people use take years. The language itself takes days if you learn it right. Make the point house, that's the key insight. That's what changes everything. It's not the content that takes years. It's the method. Bad methods take years. Good methods take days. Same content. Same mastery level. Completely different time frame. Present the framework. So what's the difference? What makes some methods take years while others take days? Let me show you the 3 core principles. The things that separate fast learning from slow learning. The things Feynman understood that most people never figure out. Principle 1. Principle 1, eliminate everything that isn't learning. Here's what shocks people when they analyze it. In traditional education, maybe 10% of the time is actual learning. The rest is administration, testing, review, weighting, logistics, and activities that create the appearance of education without the substance. Make it concrete. A typical college course. 3 hours of class per week. 15 weeks. That's 45 hours of instruction. Plus homework, studying, projects, maybe another 100 hours. Total. 150 hours over 4 months. But how much of that is actual learning? How much is new information being processed and integrated? Break it down. Class time. Half is review of previous material. A quarter is administrative, taking attendance, announcements, logistics. Maybe a quarter is new content. So from 3 hours of class, maybe 45 minutes of actual learning. Homework, half is busy work. A quarter is struggling with unclear instructions. Maybe a quarter is actual learning. So from 10 hours of homework, maybe 2 hours of learning. Add it up, from 150 hours invested, maybe 20 hours were actual learning. 20 hours spread over 4 months. That's why it feels like learning takes forever. Because 90% of the time isn't learning. Show the alternative. But what if you eliminated everything that isn't learning? What if you concentrated those 20 actual learning hours into consecutive days? 20 hours of focused learning over 1 weekend, or 4 5-hour days. That's it. That's the actual learning content of a semester-long course, compressed. Give Feynman an example. This is what Feynman did. He didn't spread learning over months. He didn't pad it with busy work and review and logistics. He identified the actual learning, the new information, the new skills, and he focused exclusively on that. Portuguese. Strip away the classroom time, the homework, busy work, the formal instruction, the scheduled classes. What's the actual learning? Understanding grammar patterns, acquiring vocabulary, practicing conversation. Maybe 30 hours of actual work, concentrated into 2 weeks. To make the principle clear, eliminate everything that isn't learning. Test yourself. Is this activity actually processing new information, building new understanding, developing new skill? If no, cut it. Most of what fills learning time isn't learning. It's scaffolding, padding, institutional necessity. Cut it all. Focus only on actual learning. First, Principle 2. Principle 2, learn by doing, not by preparing to do. Here's the typical approach: study first. Prepare thoroughly. Make sure you understand everything before you attempt anything. Only practice once you're ready. That approach takes forever. Because you're never ready. You're always preparing. I make the contrast of Feynman's approach: start doing immediately. Day 1. Even when you don't know what you're doing, especially when you don't know what you're doing. Learning happens through doing, not through preparing to do. So do first. Learn through the doing. Prepare only when doing reveals what you need to prepare. Give concrete example. A traditional language learning, study grammar for months, memorize vocabulary for months, practice pronunciation for months, then maybe try to have a conversation. Result years of study still can't converse. Because all the preparation doesn't actually teach conversation. Only conversing teaches conversation. A harsh show Feynman's approach, or Feynman learning Portuguese, started having conversations day one, badly, with massive errors, constantly getting stuck. But each attempt revealed exactly what he needed to learn. I can't express past tense. I need to learn past tense verbs. Right now. Learn those. Try again. I don't know the word for this common thing. I need that word. Right now. Get it. Try again. Learning driven by doing. Immediate application. No wasted preparation on things he wouldn't need yet. Make it practical. Want to learn programming. Don't spend months studying syntax. Write a program day one. It won't work. Fix the errors. Each error teaches you something specific you need to know. Learn exactly that. Try again. Want to learn to draw. Don't spend weeks studying theory. Draw something day one. It will look bad. Identify what's wrong. Learn exactly how to fix that specific problem. Try again. I make the principle clear. Learn by doing, not preparing. Doing creates immediate feedback. Shows you exactly what you need to learn. Prevents wasting time on things you don't actually need. Compresses months of preparation into days of targeted learning. Principle 3, focus on high leverage concepts, not comprehensive coverage. Traditional education tries to teach you everything. Complete coverage, every topic, every subtopic, every detail. Comprehensive. That takes forever, because most of what you learn has low leverage, minimal impact, doesn't generalize. Make the distinction, and smart learners identify high leverage concepts. The 20% of content that gives you 80% of the capability. The core principles that generate understanding of everything else. The patterns that repeat everywhere. Learn those first, deeply. Then everything else becomes easy or unnecessary. Give example, a traditional biology education. Memorize thousands of facts, names of structures, specific processes, detailed mechanisms, comprehensive coverage of everything. Takes years. And most of it doesn't actually help you understand biology. The HARS show the alternative high leverage biology evolution by natural selection, cell theory, DNA protein relationship, energy flows, maybe 10 core concepts. Learn those deeply, really deeply, and suddenly you can reason about most biological phenomena. The thousands of facts become obvious applications of the core concepts. You don't need to memorize them. You can derive them. Give Feynman example. Feynman learning biology. He didn't try to memorize everything. He identified core concepts, memorized almost nothing, but understood the patterns so deeply he could figure out specifics when needed. His biology colleagues had memorized vastly more facts, but he could solve problems they couldn't. Because he had high leverage understanding, not comprehensive memorization. Make it practical in any field. What are the core concepts, the fundamental patterns? The high leverage principles. Learn those first, deeply. Everything else either follows from those or doesn't actually matter. Don't aim for comprehensive coverage. Aim for deep understanding of high leverage concepts. That's how you compress years of learning into days. Bring principles together. So those are the 3 principles. 1. Eliminate everything that isn't learning. 2. Learn by doing, not preparing to do. 3. Focus on high leverage concepts, not comprehensive coverage. Make the promise or apply these 3 principles, and learning that would normally take years happens in days. Not superficially, deeply. With genuine understanding and capability. Present the method. Now let me give you the specific method. The step-by-step process that implements these principles. The way to learn anything in days. Step 1. Identify the core capability you want to develop. I want to learn Spanish. Too vague, too broad. What specifically do you want to be able to do? I want to have basic conversations in Spanish about everyday topics. That's specific, measurable, achievable in days with the right method. Make it content, not, I want to learn programming. What capability specifically? I want to build simple web applications that store and display data. Specific, focused, learnable in days. This year, explain why this matters as vague goals take forever because you never know when you're done. You keep studying, never actually achieving anything. Specific capabilities can be achieved quickly. You know exactly what you need to learn. You know when you've achieved it. You can focus. Step 2. Step 2, find the minimal viable knowledge. What's the absolute minimum you need to know to start doing the thing? Not everything. The minimum. Give example, conversational Spanish. Minimal viable knowledge, present tense verbs, about 50 common ones. Essential vocabulary, maybe 500 words. Basic sentence structure, that's it. Maybe 20 hours of actual learning. You won't speak perfectly. You won't have comprehensive knowledge, but you can have basic conversations. You can do the thing. Continue building web applications. Minimal viable knowledge, HTML basics, CSS basics. JavaScript basics, how to store data, how to display data, maybe 40 hours of actual learning. You won't be an expert, you won't know everything, but you can build simple applications. You can do the thing. Make the point. Don't try to learn everything before doing anything. Learn the minimum to start doing. Learn the rest through doing. This compresses months of comprehensive study into days of targeted learning. Step 3. Step 3, create a doing-based practice structure. Design activities that require you to actually do the thing, not study about it, do it. Make it concreting, learning conversational Spanish. Practice structure day 1, have a conversation. Use your 50 verbs and 500 words. It will be broken and frustrating. Perfect. That frustration shows you exactly what you need to learn next. Day 2, fix yesterday's biggest gap. Learn what you needed but didn't have. Have another conversation, slightly better. New gaps revealed. Day 3, fix yesterday's new gaps. Conversation again. Repeat. Continue cause learning web development. Practice structure day 1, build an application. Simple. Maybe a to-do list. It won't work well. Good. Fix what's broken. Day 2, add a feature. Discover what you don't know. Learn exactly that. Add the feature. Day 3, add another feature. Same process. Learn through building. Make the point. Every day, you're doing the actual thing. Learning is driven by doing. You learn exactly what you need, exactly when you need it. No wasted preparation. No abstract study disconnected from application. Step 4. Intensive immersion for consecutive days. Don't spread it over months. Compress it into consecutive days. Intensive, focused, immersed. Explain why, when you spread learning over months, you forget between sessions. You need constant review. You lose momentum. You never get into deep flow. But when you compress into intensive consecutive days, you maintain context, you build momentum, you enter flow states, you learn exponentially faster. And make it concrete. Instead of 1 hour per day for 100 days, do 10 hours per day for 10 days, same total time, vastly different results. The consecutive intensive approach keeps everything in working memory. You don't forget between sessions. Each day builds on the previous without loss. Give Feynman example. This is what Feynman did. When he decided to learn something, he immersed. Days of consecutive focused work, not scattered sessions over months. Portuguese 2 weeks of immersion. Biology intensive periods of focused study. Lockpicking days of concentrated practice. Make the caution. This requires clearing your schedule, taking time off, creating space. You can't do this while juggling other obligations, but it's worth it. 10 days of immersion accomplishes what months of scattered effort never could. Step 5, compress feedback loops. Traditional learning has slow feedback. You study. Then weeks later, you test. You don't know if you're learning effectively until weeks have passed. Fast learning has immediate feedback. You try, immediately discover if it worked, immediately adjust, immediately try again. Or make it practical, learning language through conversation, immediate feedback. You say something, they understand or they don't. You adjust immediately. Try again immediately. Learning programming by building immediate feedback. You write code. It works or it doesn't. Error messages tell you exactly what's wrong. Fix it immediately. Try again immediately. I contrast with traditional classroom lecture, homework, submit. Wait days for feedback. By the time you get feedback, you've forgotten the context. Feedback is useless. Fast learning, try. Get feedback instantly. Adjust. Try again. Feedback loop measured in seconds or minutes, not days or weeks. Make the principle. Design your learning so feedback is immediate. Every attempt gives instant information about what's working and what isn't. That rapid iteration accelerates learning dramatically. Bring method together. So that's the 5-step method. 1, identify specific capability. 2, find minimal viable knowledge. 3, create doing-based practice. 4, intensive consecutive immersion. 5, compress feedback loops. Ian make the promise use this method, and you can learn in days what normally takes months or years. Not superficially, with genuine capability, deep enough to actually do the thing. Tell transformation story. Let me tell you about someone who used this method. Call him Alex. Alex wanted to learn data science. He'd enrolled in an online course, traditional approach, videos, lectures, homework. Scheduled over 6 months. Slow, steady progress. 3 months in, he'd learned a lot of theory. But he couldn't actually do data science. Couldn't build anything real. Couldn't apply the knowledge. The shifter. Then he learned about Feynman's method, and he scrapped the traditional approach. Completely. He took 1 week off work, 7 days, intensive immersion, and he designed a doing-based learning structure. As his approach go all. Build 3 real data analysis projects, specific, measurable. Minimal knowledge basic Python, Pandas library, visualization basics, statistical concepts, maybe what would normally be 2 weeks of traditional study. Practice structure day 1, start building project 1. Get stuck immediately. Learn exactly what he needed to get unstuck. Build more. Get stuck again. Learn, build. Repeat the week of day 1. Lots of getting stuck, lots of learning, slow progress, frustrating. But project 1 started taking shape. Day 2 still getting stuck. But less. Building faster. Learning exactly what he needed as he needed it. Day 3, project 1 done. Crude but functional. Started project 2, used what he'd learned. Went faster. Day 4, project 2 done. Patterns emerging. Project 3 started. Days 5 through 7, project 3 done. Refinements. Improvements. Real capability developing. The result of 1 week. 3 real projects completed. More actual capability than 3 months of traditional study had developed. Not because he rushed. Because he eliminated waste, learned through doing, focused on high-leverage skills, immersed intensively, and got immediate feedback. The follow-up, 2 months later, he got a data science job, despite only 1 week of focused learning, because that 1 week developed real capability. The traditional 3 months had developed theoretical knowledge without practical skill. A sex make the universal point. That's available to you, that compression, that acceleration, that ability to learn in days instead of years, not by cutting corners, not by learning superficially, but by eliminating waste, focusing on what matters, and learning through intensive doing. Address objections. Now, some objections you might have, but doesn't deep learning require time? Don't you need years to really master something? Answer. Deep learning requires intensive focused practice. Not time. You can get more deep practice in 10 intensive days than in a year of scattered hours. Mastery takes time to develop, yes, but initial competence, the ability to actually do the thing at a functional level, that can happen in days with the right method. And initial competence is where most people give up. They spend years trying to reach basic capability using slow methods, then quit before getting there. Fast methods get you to initial capability quickly. Then you can decide if you want to continue to mastery. But at least you have the capability. You can do the thing. Second objection, but won't I forget if I learn so quickly? Don't I need spaced repetition over time to retain? Answer, you forget abstract knowledge studied in isolation. You don't forget capabilities you've actually used to do real things. When you learn through intensive doing, you're not just memorizing, you're building skills. Skills stick better than abstract knowledge. And if you do need to retain abstract knowledge, you can add spaced repetition after the intensive learning. But the intensive immersion creates the initial learning. Spaced repetition just maintains it. Third objection. But I don't have time to take 10 days off for intensive learning. Answer. You're already spending the time, just spread over months, with massive waste, inefficiently. Take the total time you'd spend learning something the traditional way. Compress it. Eliminate the waste. And you'll find it fits into much shorter intensive periods. 1 week of intensive immersion replaces 6 months of scattered study. You're saving time, not spending more. Make the choice clear. The question isn't, do you have time for intensive learning? The question is, do you want to spend months learning slowly or days learning fast? At present, the deeper principle. Here's the deeper principle behind all of this. Schools aren't designed for fast learning. They're designed for institutions, for schedules, for standardization, for processing large numbers of students. for credentialing. A, make it clear fast learning is inconvenient for institutions. Can't standardize it. Can't schedule it easily. Can't process masses through it. Can't credential it simply. So institutions use slow methods. Not because slow is better, but because slow is institutionally convenient. The liberation, but you're not an institution. You don't need institutional convenience. You need actual learning, so you can use fast methods. The methods that actually work for human brains. The methods that compress years into days. Richard Feynman's insight of Feynman understood this. He learned outside institutions whenever possible. When he had to work within institutions, he ignored their slow methods and used fast ones anyway. That's why he could learn so much, so deeply, so quickly. Because he refused to be limited by institutionally convenient methods. Walk to center So here's what you need to understand: learning doesn't take years. Bad methods take years. Good methods take days. It's our direct statement. You can learn conversational language in weeks. You can learn programming in days. You can learn to draw in months. You can develop real capability in any field in compressed time frames that seem impossible with traditional methods. The 3 principles that eliminate everything that isn't learning. Learn by doing, not preparing to do. Focus on high leverage concepts, not comprehensive coverage. Not for the 5 steps to identify specific capability. Find minimal viable knowledge. Create doing-based practice. Intensive consecutive immersion. Compress feedback loops. Asset the promisee, use these and years compress into days. Not because you're rushing. Not because you're cutting corners. But because you're eliminating waste and focusing on what actually creates learning. Final challenge, so here's my challenge: pick one thing, one skill, one capability you've been meaning to learn, something you thought would take months or years, and learn it in a week, using this method, intensive immersion, doing-based practice, focused on high-leverage concepts, immediate feedback. Ayers make the prediction, yet you'll be shocked how much you can learn, how deep you can go, how capable you can become, in just 1 week of focused, efficient, intensive learning. And you'll realize it was never about the time. It was always about the method. Final statement: smart people don't learn slowly. They learn fast. Not because they're smarter, because they use better methods. Stop using methods designed for institutions. Start using methods designed for human brains. Learn in days, not years. Thank you. If you want to understand more about how Feynman learned, the specific techniques he used, the detailed practices, the actual methods for learning anything quickly, do me a favor, like this video and subscribe to the Mind of Richard Feynman channel. We're exploring how to learn efficiently, how to compress years into days, how to develop real capability fast. Join us. Let's learn like geniuses together. See you in the next one. You know what's strange about the way people approach getting things done? They treat it like a battle against time itself. They make lists, they schedule every minute, they push harder and harder until they collapse. And then they wonder why nothing actually gets finished. Here's the real puzzle. The people who seem to accomplish the most aren't the ones grinding away 16 hours a day. They're often working less, enjoying it more, and producing work that actually matters. How is that possible? The answer isn't what you think. It's not about willpower or discipline or managing your time better. Those things help, sure, but they're missing the fundamental principle. The real secret is understanding what work actually is at the level of your brain. Let's start with what everyone gets wrong. When you sit down to work, you probably think the goal is to spend time working. That's the first mistake. Time spent is not the same as work done. You can sit at a desk for 8 hours and accomplish almost nothing. We've all done it. The second mistake is even more subtle. People think that if they just eliminate distractions, they'll be productive. So they find a quiet room, they close the door, they clear their desk, and then nothing happens. Or worse, something does happen, but it's the wrong thing. They spend 3 hours perfecting something that doesn't matter. Why? Because productivity isn't about removing obstacles. It's about understanding how the brain actually processes work. And the brain has some very particular rules about what it can and cannot do. Here's the first principle. The brain can only hold about 3 or 4 distinct ideas at once in active thought, not more. That's not a limitation we can overcome with practice. That's architecture. When you try to think about too many things simultaneously, the brain doesn't just slow down, it starts making errors. It drops pieces. It confuses relationships between ideas. Now watch what happens when someone tries to be productive without understanding this. They make a list with 20 items. They tell themselves they'll work on all of them today. Maybe they even assign time blocks. 9 to 10, work on the report. 10 to 11, respond to correspondence. 11 to 12, plan next week. But here's what actually happens in the brain. Every time you switch between tasks, there's a setup cost. The brain has to clear out the current problem, load in the new problem, retrieve the relevant context, and rebuild the mental model. That takes energy and time. If you're switching every hour, you're spending a huge fraction of your day just loading and unloading mental states. The really productive people, they don't do this. They work on one thing, maybe two if they're related, for as long as the problem demands. They let the brain build up a full, rich model of the problem space. And once that model is built, the brain can do something remarkable. It can work on the problem even when you're not consciously thinking about it. You've experienced this. You work hard on something, get stuck, go for a walk, and suddenly the solution appears. That's not magic. That's the brain continuing to process in the background. But it can only do this if you've given it enough focused time to build the model in the first place. Here's the second principle. Real work happens in bursts, not in steady streams. The brain has different modes of operation. There's a focused mode where you're actively manipulating ideas, and there's a diffuse mode where connections form more loosely. Both are necessary. Neither is optional. Think about reading a difficult technical book. You can't just read for 6 hours straight and expect to understand it. What actually works is reading intensely for an hour, then doing something completely different. Walking, washing dishes, staring at the ceiling. During that diffuse time, the brain is consolidating what you learned, finding connections, moving information into longer-term storage. But people don't structure their work this way. They think breaks are wasted time, so they push through, staying in focused mode until their brain simply refuses to cooperate anymore. And then they wonder why they're exhausted but haven't learned anything. The truly productive approach is different. Work intensely on one problem for 60 to 90 minutes. Not sort of working, not working while distracted, but really focusing every available mental resource on that single problem. Then stop. Completely stop. Do something that requires no mental effort at all. What happens during that break is critical. The brain reviews what just happened. It strengthens the important connections and weakens the irrelevant ones. It finds patterns you didn't consciously notice. When you come back to the work, you're not just rested, you actually understand the problem better than you did before the break. Now here's where it gets interesting. The third principle, the brain is remarkably good at knowing what's important, but only if you let it. There's a natural filtering system that sorts problems by urgency and significance. But this system gets overridden when you try to force everything to be equally important. Watch what happens when someone makes a list of 20 tasks and tries to treat them all as critical. The brain can't do it. It rebels. It chooses randomly, or it procrastinates on everything, or it picks the easiest tasks rather than the important ones. Why? Because when everything is urgent, nothing is urgent. The natural filtering system shuts down. The solution is counterintuitive. Instead of trying to do everything, explicitly decide that most things won't get done today. Pick one, maybe two, genuinely important problems. Tell yourself clearly and deliberately, these are the only things that matter today. Everything else can wait. The brain needs this. It needs to know where to allocate resources. Once you give it clear priorities, something remarkable happens. All that worry about the other tasks fades away. The brain stops spending energy maintaining those other mental states, and suddenly you have much more capacity available for the actual work. But here's the crucial part. Those one or two tasks have to be real work, not administrative shuffling. Real work means grappling with problems that don't have obvious solutions. Writing something new, figuring out why an experiment failed, designing something that's never been designed before. The kind of thing where you have to think. Most of what people call being busy isn't this. It's responding to correspondence, attending meetings, reorganizing files, making plans. These things feel like work because they consume time and energy. But they're not work in the deep sense. They're maintenance. And maintenance expands to fill whatever time you give it. Here's the fourth principle. The brain needs to see progress, not just activity. There's a feedback system that monitors whether effort is leading to results. When that system sees progress, it releases energy and motivation to continue. When it doesn't see progress, it shuts down. This is why people get stuck in procrastination loops. They start working on something difficult. It doesn't come together immediately. The brain's monitoring system says, "This isn't working. Let's try something easier." So they switch to checking correspondence or tidying their desk or planning. Those activities feel productive because they complete quickly. The brain gets its progress signal, and it feels good, but nothing important actually happened. And eventually, the brain notices this too. The result is a peculiar kind of exhaustion. You worked all day, you were busy all day, but you can't point to anything meaningful that got done. The way out is to change how you define progress. For difficult work, progress isn't finishing. Progress is understanding the problem better than you did an hour ago. Progress is trying an approach and discovering why it doesn't work. Progress is writing a rough version that you know isn't right yet, but that makes the problem concrete. Once you redefine progress this way, the brain's feedback system works with you instead of against you. You work for 90 minutes, and even if you didn't solve the problem, you understand it better. That's progress. The brain registers it as such and stays engaged. This connects to something deeper about how understanding actually develops. You can't force understanding. You can't schedule it. What you can do is put yourself in a position where understanding can happen. That means engaging repeatedly with a problem, looking at it from different angles, trying things that don't work, building intuition slowly. Think about learning physics or mathematics or any complex skill. The people who actually master it don't just study harder. They study differently. They work problems until they get stuck. Then they think about why they got stuck. They try to explain concepts in their own words. They look for multiple ways to approach the same idea. This takes time. It takes many sessions of focused work with breaks in between. But it produces something that memorization and grinding never can. Genuine understanding that stays with you and applies to new situations. Now, here's what all of this means for being productive. Real productivity isn't about doing more things. It's about making progress on things that actually matter. And to do that, you need to work with your brain's architecture instead of against it. Start by identifying one problem worth solving. Not 10, not 5, one. Something where progress would actually change things. Then clear away everything else, not forever, just for the next 90 minutes. During those 90 minutes, focus completely. No half attention, no checking other things, no multitasking. Just you and the problem. Work until you get tired or stuck, whichever comes first. Don't push past that point. The tired brain doesn't produce good work. It produces work that you'll have to redo. When you stop, really stop. Go for a walk. Make something to eat. Do anything that requires no significant mental effort. Don't feel guilty about this. This is part of the work. During this time, your brain is consolidating, connecting, preparing for the next session. Then, and only then, come back for another focused session. With a fresh brain, the problem often looks different. Solutions that weren't visible before become obvious. Approaches that seemed impossibly complex become manageable. Do this pattern twice, maybe 3 times in a day, and you'll accomplish more than most people do in a week of scattered effort. Not because you worked longer, but because you worked with purpose and with an understanding of how the brain actually functions. The people who seem impossibly productive aren't superhuman. They're not more disciplined or more motivated. They've just figured out this pattern, consciously or unconsciously. They protect their focus. They work on one thing at a time. They take real breaks, and they trust that the brain will do its job if they give it the right conditions. There's one more crucial piece to this. You have to become comfortable with leaving things undone. Not important things. Those get your focused attention. But all the small tasks, the administrative details, the things that could be done but don't really matter, these have to wait. This is harder than it sounds. We're taught that being responsible means handling everything promptly, but that's backwards. Being truly responsible means recognizing what's important and protecting your ability to do it well. Everything else is just noise. When you work this way, something unusual happens. You stop feeling busy all the time. Instead, you feel calm and focused during work sessions and genuinely relaxed during breaks. And at the end of the week, you look back and realize you accomplished more than you used to in a month. That's what real productivity feels like. Not like grinding, not like forcing yourself, not like battling against time. It feels like the natural result of understanding how the brain works and cooperating with it. The question isn't whether you can be this productive. You can. The question is whether you're willing to work differently than everyone around you, to focus on one thing when others are juggling 10, to take breaks when others are pushing through, to leave minor tasks undone when others are scrambling to handle everything. It takes confidence to work this way. You'll look like you're doing less, but you'll know something that others don't. Real work isn't measured in hours or tasks completed. It's measured in problems solved, in understanding gained, in things created that didn't exist before. That's the kind of productivity that matters. That's the kind that compounds over time, building on itself, creating something genuinely new. And it's available to anyone who's willing to stop fighting their brain and start working with it instead. Try this tomorrow. Pick one problem. Give it 90 minutes of complete focus. Take a real break. Come back fresh. See what happens. You might be surprised at how much is possible when you stop trying to do everything and start doing something that matters. There's something else that happens when you work this way. Something that takes longer to notice but matters more than anything else. The quality of your thinking changes. When you're constantly scattered, jumping between tasks, always half distracted, your brain never gets to go deep. You stay on the surface of problems. You find the obvious solutions, the conventional approaches, the things everyone else would think of. There's nothing wrong with that, but there's nothing remarkable about it either. But when you give your brain extended time with a single problem, something different becomes possible. After the first 30 minutes, you exhaust the obvious approaches. After 60 minutes, you start seeing patterns that weren't visible before. After 90 minutes, if you're really focused, you sometimes reach a state where the problem starts revealing its own structure. This is where the interesting work lives. Not in the first answer that comes to mind, but in the 5th or 6th attempt after you've tried the simple approaches and found them wanting. That's when you have to actually think, when you have to look at the problem from angles that aren't immediately obvious. Most people never reach this depth because they don't stay with any single problem long enough. They get uncomfortable with not having an immediate answer, so they move on to something easier, or they get interrupted and lose the thread entirely. Either way, they stay forever on the surface. The irony is that the surface is where everyone else is working too. So if you stay there, you're competing with everyone. Your work looks like everyone else's work. Your solutions are the same solutions everyone else finds. There's no advantage to be gained. But go deeper, stay focused longer, and you're suddenly in territory where few people ever venture. Not because it's forbidden or difficult to access, but simply because it requires sustained attention. And most people don't give themselves permission to work that way. This is where the compound effects start to appear. Each time you solve a problem at depth, you build intuition about how those kinds of problems work. The next time you face something similar, you start deeper than you did before. Over months and years, this adds up. You develop a way of seeing problems that others don't have. This isn't about being smarter. It's about being willing to sit with difficulty long enough to see through it. Anyone can develop this capacity. It just requires protecting your focus consistently over time. There's a final piece worth understanding. When you work with genuine focus, you're not just getting things done. You're training your brain to focus. The ability to concentrate is like a muscle. It strengthens with use and weakens without it. Every time you maintain focus, despite the urge to check something else, you're making it easier to focus next time. This means the method gets easier the longer you use it. The first few times, 90 minutes of unbroken focus might feel nearly impossible. Your brain will fight you, offering up every distraction and excuse, but stay with it. And within weeks, that same focus starts to feel natural. Eventually, it becomes your default mode rather than something you have to force. That's when productivity stops feeling like work and starts feeling like inevitability. You sit down, focus comes naturally, problems yield to sustained attention, and meaningful work happens almost effortlessly. Not because the work got easier, but because you've trained yourself to engage with it properly. This is what's possible when you stop treating productivity as time management and start treating it as attention management. Everything flows from that one shift in understanding. Here's something that doesn't make sense. People set goals all the time. They write them down, they think about them, they tell their friends about them, and then nothing happens. The goal sits there like a piece of furniture in a room nobody uses. What's going on? The answer isn't what most people think. It's not about willpower. It's not about wanting it badly enough. The real problem is that goals and actions live in different worlds, and most people never build the bridge between them. Think about what a goal actually is. It's a description of a future state. I want to learn physics. I want to write a book. I want to be in better shape. These are descriptions, nothing more. And here's the peculiar thing. The brain doesn't know what to do with descriptions. The brain works with actions, with sequences, with patterns of behavior that can be executed right now. When someone says, "I want to learn physics," they're holding a photograph of a destination. But there's no map, there's no sequence of steps. There's just this image of being somewhere other than where they are. And then they wonder why they're not making progress. This confusion runs deeper than most people realize. Goals feel productive. Writing them down feels like you're doing something. Thinking about them creates a little burst of satisfaction, almost as if the future you've imagined is already starting to become real. But that feeling is a trick. The brain can't tell the difference between imagining something vividly and actually doing it, not completely. So you get a small reward from just thinking about the goal, which actually reduces the motivation to pursue it. What you need instead is something entirely different. Not goals, but systems. And the difference between these two things is fundamental. A system is a repeating pattern of behavior that exists in time. It's not a destination, it's a process that happens on a schedule. Every Monday and Thursday at 7 in the morning, you sit down with your physics textbook for 1 hour. That's a system. It has a time, a place, a specific action, and a trigger that sets it in motion. The system doesn't care about the distant future. It only cares about what happens next Monday at 7. Here's why this matters. The brain is extraordinarily good at learning patterns and executing them automatically. Give it a consistent sequence, same time, same place, same action, and after a few repetitions, the system starts running itself. You don't have to decide whether to study physics on Monday morning. The decision was made when you designed the system. Monday morning arrives, and the behavior unfolds. This is how we actually do things in the world. Not through constant acts of will, but through the construction of reliable machinery that operates whether we feel like it or not. Now, building these systems requires understanding something specific about how behavior works. Every action has 3 components: a cue, a routine, and a consequence. The cue triggers the behavior, the routine is the behavior itself, and the consequence determines whether the behavior will be repeated. Most people ignore the cue entirely. They think if they just remember to do something, they'll do it. But memory is unreliable, especially when you're busy or tired. What you need is an external trigger, something in the environment that automatically prompts the action. The most powerful cues are time and place. This is why scheduling matters. Not because time is magical, but because a clock is a reliable external signal. 7 o'clock Monday morning happens whether you think about it or not. The clock hand arrives at the right position, and that physical fact in the world can trigger your behavior. Place works the same way. If you always study at the same desk, in the same chair, that location becomes associated with the activity. You sit down, and the brain says, "Oh, this is where we do physics problems." The behavior becomes attached to the space. This is why people who exercise at the same gym, at the same time, have much better success than people who say, "I'll exercise when I have time." When you have time is not a cue, it's a wish. 7 o'clock at the gym on Tuesday, that's a cue. The routine itself needs to be specific and small. This is where most systems fail. People design routines that are too ambitious. I'm going to study physics for 3 hours every day. That sounds impressive, but it's probably unsustainable. What happens when you're tired? When something unexpected comes up? The system breaks, and once it breaks, it's hard to restart. Better to design a routine that's almost too easy. 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Something you could do even on your worst day. The consistency matters more than the duration. Do 15 minutes every single day, and in a month you've accumulated 7.5 hours. Miss 3 days, and you've started the process of abandoning the system entirely. There's a principle here that's worth understanding. Small actions, repeated consistently, compound over time in ways that large, sporadic efforts do not. If you write 1 page every day, you have a manuscript in a year. If you wait for inspiration and then write 20 pages, you'll probably wait forever. The brain learns from repetition. Every time you execute the behavior, you're strengthening the neural pathways that make that behavior easier to execute next time. This is physical. Neurons that fire together wire together. The more you repeat the pattern, the more automatic it becomes, until eventually the behavior requires almost no conscious effort at all. But here's something subtle. The consequence of the behavior needs to be immediately reinforcing, at least a little bit. This is tricky because most meaningful goals have their payoff far in the future. Learning physics takes years. Writing a book takes months. The benefits aren't immediate, so you need to engineer immediate consequences. The simplest way is to track the behavior itself. Keep a calendar. Mark an X on every day you execute the system. After a few weeks, you'll have a chain of X's, and there's something satisfying about not breaking that chain. The chain becomes its own reward. Some people use a physical object. Move a marble from one jar to another every time you complete the routine. Some people use a simple notebook where they write 1 sentence about what they did. The specific method doesn't matter. What matters is that there's a small, immediate reinforcement that says, "You did the thing." This creates a feedback loop. The cue triggers the routine produces the consequence, and the consequence makes you more likely to respond to the cue next time. After enough repetitions, the entire sequence becomes automatic. You no longer need willpower. The system runs itself. Now, there's a deeper principle underneath all of this. Goals are about outcomes, but outcomes are not directly controllable. You can't decide to have learned physics. You can't decide to have written a book. These things are emergent properties of thousands of small actions accumulated over time. What you can control is your behavior in this moment. Right now, you can decide to open a textbook. You can decide to write a paragraph. You can decide to do 20 push-ups. The immediate action is always within your power. Systems shift your attention from outcomes to processes. Instead of asking, "Have I achieved the goal?" you ask, "Did I execute the system today?" And that second question has a clear, immediate answer. Either you did it or you didn't. There's no ambiguity, no waiting around for future results. This changes the psychology completely. With goals, you're always measuring yourself against something you haven't accomplished yet. You're always falling short until the moment you succeed, and that moment might be months or years away. With systems, you succeed every single day you execute the behavior. The success is immediate and tangible. This isn't just philosophical. It affects motivation in a concrete way. The brain releases dopamine not when you achieve distant goals, but when you make progress toward them. Every time you execute your system, you're creating a small win, and small wins produce the neurochemical reward that keeps you going. There's another aspect to this that's worth thinking about. Systems free up mental resources that goals consume. When you have a goal, part of your mind is constantly monitoring your progress, worrying about whether you're doing enough, feeling anxious about the gap between where you are and where you want to be. This monitoring takes energy. With a system, there's nothing to monitor except whether you did today's routine. Either you studied physics for 20 minutes this morning, or you didn't. That's it. No need to calculate how many more years of study you need. No need to compare yourself to others. No need to worry about the ultimate outcome. Just execute the system and move on with your day. This mental simplification is powerful. It reduces decision fatigue. It eliminates the constant internal debate about whether to do the thing. Monday at 7, you study physics. There's no decision to make. But let's be clear about something. Systems aren't magic. Building a system takes thought and planning. You need to understand your own patterns. When do you have consistent time available? Where can you work without interruption? What cues already exist in your environment that you can leverage? Some people are naturally structured. They wake up at the same time every day, eat at the same time, follow predictable routines. For these people, adding a new system is relatively straightforward. Find a slot in the existing pattern and insert the new behavior. Other people have lives that are more chaotic. Different schedule every day, unexpected demands, lots of interruptions. For these people, building systems is harder, but even more important. You need to find the stable points, the times or places that are reliably available, and build your systems around those anchor points. Maybe you can't control when you wake up, but you always eat lunch. Okay, the 15 minutes after lunch is when you read. Maybe your evenings are unpredictable, but you always commute home from work. Use that time. The specific implementation doesn't matter. What matters is finding the reliable patterns in your life and attaching new behaviors to them. There's also the question of multiple systems. Can you maintain several at once? The answer is yes, but with a caveat. Each system requires a certain amount of mental overhead until it becomes automatic. If you try to install 5 new behaviors simultaneously, you'll probably fail at all of them. Better to build systems sequentially. Start with 1. Execute it consistently for several weeks until it becomes automatic. Then add another. The first system is now running on autopilot, so you have mental resources available to establish the second one. Build your life this way, one system at a time, and after a year or two, you'll have a collection of automated behaviors that produce enormous cumulative results. Here's where this gets interesting. Once you have several systems running, they start to interact. The system where you exercise every morning gives you more energy, which makes the system where you study in the evening easier to maintain. The system where you read for 20 minutes before bed improves your thinking, which makes your work system more effective. This is compound interest, but for behavior. Each system produces benefits that amplify the effects of your other systems. The whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. And there's something else. Systems create identity. When you execute a behavior consistently, you start to see yourself as the kind of person who does that thing. You're not someone who wants to learn physics. You're someone who studies physics every Monday and Thursday morning. That's who you are. This identity shift is subtle but profound. Identity shapes behavior more powerfully than goals ever could. Now, what about the goals themselves? Should you abandon them entirely? Not exactly. Goals are useful as direction indicators. They tell you which systems to build. If your goal is to learn physics, that suggests building a system around regular study. If your goal is to write a book, that suggests building a system around daily writing. The goal provides direction, but the system provides movement. You need both. The mistake is focusing on the goal at the expense of the system, or worse, thinking that setting the goal is itself an accomplishment. There's a final piece to this that ties everything together. Systems work because they align with how the brain actually operates. The brain is not a rational planning engine. It's a pattern-matching machine that learns from repetition and responds to cues in the environment. When you try to achieve goals through willpower and decision-making, you're fighting against the brain's natural operating system. You're trying to consciously control every action, every day, forever. That's exhausting, and it doesn't work for long. When you build systems, you're working with the brain's natural machinery. You're installing patterns that become automatic. You're using external cues to trigger behavior instead of relying on memory and will. You're creating immediate feedback loops that reinforce the behavior. You're doing what the brain is already designed to do. This is why systems work when goals fail. Not because systems are more powerful, but because they're compatible with the way behavior actually operates in the physical machinery of the brain. So here's what you do. Take the goal that's been sitting in your mind like unused furniture. Ask yourself, what specific behavior, repeated regularly, would move me toward this? What time and place could I attach this behavior to? What cue would trigger it reliably? How can I make the behavior small enough that I could do it on my worst day? Design the system. Write it down. Be specific, not "I'll study more," but every Monday and Thursday at 7 a.m., I sit at my kitchen table with my physics textbook for 20 minutes. Then execute it. Do it once, then do it again, then keep doing it until you don't have to think about it anymore. Until Monday morning arrives and you're at the kitchen table with the textbook before you've fully woken up. That's when you know the system is working. Build systems like this, one at a time, and something remarkable happens. The life you wanted to live, the one you described with your goals, starts to emerge naturally from the systems you've built. Not because you forced it into existence, but because you constructed reliable machinery that generates the right behaviors automatically. The future you imagined wasn't wrong. You just needed to understand that futures aren't destinations you arrive at. They're patterns of behavior extended through time. Build the right patterns, and the future builds itself. If this made you think differently about how to approach what you want to accomplish, hit subscribe. There's more to explore about how thinking clearly changes everything.
I want you to really think about something for a moment, because there is a fundamental misunderstanding that plagues our society, a misconception that limits human potential more than any other factor. People often come to me and say, "I am not creative. I am logical. I do not have that gift." They speak of creativity as if it were a noun, a possession, like having blue eyes or a tall stature. But let me tell you, that is scientifically and philosophically incorrect. Creativity is not a noun. It is a verb. It is something you do, not something you have. Just as you do not wake up and simply have focus or motivation, you must generate them. You must also generate creativity. Consider children. If I were to walk into a kindergarten class right now and ask, "Who here is an artist?" every single hand would shoot up. They do not hesitate. They do not judge themselves. They simply explore. But somewhere along the line, we learn to fear being wrong. We learn to conform. We stop doing creativity and start waiting for it to strike like lightning. The secret is, you are already one of the gifted few. The machinery is there. You have simply forgotten how to operate it because you have retreated into what I call the cocoon. Let me illustrate this with a case study that might change how you view your daily interaction. Imagine you are on a flight. You have the aisle seat, and the middle seat is empty. You are comfortable. You are hoping, perhaps praying, that nobody sits there. Then, an elderly woman walks down the aisle. She looks different, perhaps a bit disheveled. Your instinct, the instinct of the cocoon, is to pull away. You put on your headphones. You isolate yourself with your music, perhaps listening to something sophisticated like Stravinsky's Firebird Suite, feeling very intellectual. You spend 5 hours sitting 5 inches away from this woman, ignoring her completely. Then, as the plane descends, she taps you on the shoulder. You discover in the last 30 seconds of the flight that she was actually a close friend of Igor Stravinsky. She was with him when he wrote the very music you were listening to. You see, by staying in your cocoon, by avoiding the uncomfortable or the different, you missed a connection to history. You missed a spark. And this is exactly how we kill our own ideas. The key is to understand that creativity is, at its core, simply the act of connecting dots. That is all it is. It is not creating something out of nothing. It is taking 2 distinct elements, a horse and the bar, a phone and the internet, and finding the surprising link between them. Now imagine your mind is a collection of these dots. These dots represent your experiences, the people you meet, the books you read. Here is the problem most professionals face. If you are an accountant and you only talk to accountants and you only read accounting journals, your collection of dots is identical. It is a sheet of navy blue dots, all 3/4 inches wide. And if you only have navy blue dots, you can only create navy blue ideas. They are predictable. they are safe, and they are utterly forgettable. To have an idea so powerful it feels illegal, you need a red dot. You need a green dot. You need to introduce a variable that does not belong. History proves this time and time again. Look at the printing press. Johannes Gutenberg did not invent the wine press, and he did not invent movable type. He simply saw two existing dots and connected them in a way nobody else had. Look at the Beatles. They connected blues, Motown, and skiffle. This is why innovation almost always comes from outside the industry. If you are inside the automotive industry, you are taught the limitations of that industry. You need an outsider, someone like Elon Musk, for instance, to look at the problem without those pre-existing limitations and ask a different question. You need to understand this. The quality of your output is determined entirely by the diversity of your input. You must become a dot collector. You have to consciously crack that cocoon. Instead of looking at a problem with your standard logical toolkit, you need to ask, how would a biologist solve this? How would a musician approach this?
But collecting the dots is only the first step. It is the raw material. The actual processing, the synthesis of these ideas requires a specific state of mind. We often think we need to grind harder, focus more, and drink more coffee to have a breakthrough. But biologically, that is often the worst thing you can do. The brain states required for execution are not the same as the brain states required for imagination. There is a reason why your best ideas do not come when you are staring at a spreadsheet, but rather when you're in the shower or drifting off to sleep. We need to talk about how to access those states on command. We need to talk about how to turn your brain into a laboratory that works for you, even when you are not consciously trying. Because once you have collected the dots, you need to know how to let them collide. So, now that we have talked about collecting these dots, these little pieces of the puzzle, we run into a bit of a problem. You see, you can have all the dots in the world. You can have a head full of facts and experiences. But if you don't know how to mix them, they are just clutter. It's like having a garage full of car parts, but no mechanic to put them together. The engine won't run. And this is where things get really interesting, because most of us are trying to force creativity while we are in the wrong gear. We are running around in what scientists call the beta state. That is when you are wide awake, alert, stressed, trying to get things done. But trying to be creative in that state is like trying to plant a garden in the middle of a highway. It's just too fast. The soil isn't right. The secret is you have to slow the machine down. You have to find the gaps between the noise. Have you ever noticed, and I mean really noticed, that your best ideas never come when you are sitting at your desk, staring at a blank screen, gritting your teeth? No, they come when you are in the shower, or when you are driving down a long, boring road, or right when you are drifting off to sleep. Why is that? Is it the water? Is it the soap? No, it's the brain wave. When you relax, when you step away from the problem, your brain shifts down into alpha or theta states. The critical guard at the door takes a coffee break, and suddenly, all those dots you collected starts floating around and bumping into each other. That is when the magic happens. I want to tell you about Albert Einstein. Pretty smart guy, right? He knew this. He understood that he couldn't just think his way to a breakthrough using logic alone. So he had this trick, this little game he played with his own biology. He would sit in his favorite chair to take a nap, but he would hold a rock in his hand, and on the floor, right beneath his hand, he would place a metal plate. He would let himself drift, drifting down from being awake into that twilight zone, that theta state, where the dreams start to mix with reality. And just as he fell asleep, his hand would relax, the rock would fall. Clang! It would hit the plate and wake him up. He didn't want to sleep. He wanted to surf the edge of sleep, because right there, in that slippery moment between waking and dreaming, that is where the genius lives. You need to understand this. You have a supercomputer between your ears,
but you are only using it when the monitor is on. You are ignoring the background processing. We spend, maybe 20 years of our lives sleeping? And 3 to 5 years of that is just dreaming. Most people treat sleep like a waste of time. They think it's just a shutdown mode, but it's not. It's a work mode. History is filled with people who knew how to use this illegal power. Mary Shelley? She didn't sit down and logically deduce the plot of Frankenstein. She dreamt it. Paul McCartney? The melody for Yesterday, one of the most covered songs in history, he woke up with it playing in his head. The periodic table of elements? A chemist saw the structure in a dream. They weren't just lucky. They were using a different operating system. So, how do you do it? How do you actually program this computer instead of just hoping for a random glitch of brilliance? It starts with intention. You know how, if you have to catch an early flight, say at 4 a.m., you set your alarm, but you wake up 2 minutes before it goes off? You have done that, right? We all have. That is your brain following a command you gave it hours ago. It has an internal clock.
Well, if your brain can wake you up at a specific time just because you asked it, what else can it do?
The key is to give it a job before you clock out.
Before you go to sleep, instead of scrolling through social media and filling your head with garbage,
ask yourself a question. How do I solve this problem? How can I make this better? Don't try to answer it. Just ask it. Drop the pebble in the pond and walk away. Questions are the answer. If you ask a different question, you get a different answer. If you ask, why is this so hard? Your brain will give you a list of reasons why it sucks. But if you ask, what is the one thing I haven't tried yet? Your subconscious goes to work. It spends the next 8 hours digging through that pile of dots you collected, looking for a connection. But then, and this is where everyone fails, this is where the tragedy happens. You wake up. You are in that beautiful groggy theta state. The ideas are there. They are bubbling up like fresh water. And what do? You reach for your phone. Boom, gone. You flood your brain with emails, texts, bad news, other people's lives. You kick yourself out of the creative state and slam right back into that stressed out beta state. You are reacting to the world instead of creating it. You have to protect that first hour. You have to be jealous of it. Keep a journal by your bed. Capture the gold before it evaporates. Because, really, creativity isn't about adding more stress. It's about removing the interference. It's about asking the right question, stepping back, and letting the machine do what it was built to do. It's not magic. It's engineering. You are engineering your own biology to produce genius. And frankly, it is a lot more fun than staring at a blank wall waiting for lightning to... Now, once you have the dots and you have the state of mind, there is one more piece, the execution. Because you can dream up Frankenstein or the iPhone, but if you don't know how to put it into the world, it's just a ghost. And this is where we have to talk about courage and being willing to look like a fool. This is where we have to talk about the thing that stops almost everyone. You can collect all the dots in the world. You can have the most diverse, colorful collection of experiences. You can be a physicist who paints and studies ancient Greek poetry, and you can have the best morning routine in existence. You can do the Einstein trick with the rock. You can write down your dreams, but it all means absolutely nothing. Zero. If you don't have the courage to look like a complete idiot. I mean it. You have to be willing to look foolish. Because, think about it, a creative idea, by definition, is something new. It hasn't been done before. And if it hasn't been done before, it looks weird. It looks wrong. It looks like it doesn't belong. And our instinct, that cocoon instinct we talked about, screams at us to keep our mouths shut so we don't get laughed at. The secret is, the best ideas always sound crazy at first. There is this story, a wonderful story, about a TV show back in the 80s. They had booked a huge star. I think it was Johnny Depp, but he canceled at the last minute. Panic. Absolute panic. The producers are sitting around a table, sweating, trying to figure out who to book. They are suggesting quarterbacks, news anchors, the standard blue dot idea. And then, the lowest paid writer in the room, a guy nobody really listened to, pipes up and says, I can do something with liquid nitrogen. Now, imagine that. You are looking for a celebrity guest, and this guy suggests freezing an onion. The boss told him to shut up. Literally, shut up, Bill, because it didn't fit the pattern. But the writer kept going. He painted a picture. He said, "No, look, we freeze a marshmallow, we eat it, smoke comes out of our nose. It'll be funny." He connected two dots that had no business being together, hard science and sketch comedy. And because he was willing to look stupid, because he was willing to be the different dot in the room, that writer, Bill Nye, became the science guy. He changed the world for an entire generation of kids, but he could only do that because he cracked the cocoon. He didn't stay in his lane.
You need to understand this. The future, the world we are heading into, it doesn't belong to the people who can just follow instruction. We have machines for that now. We have computers that can calculate faster than you, memorize more than you, and organize data better than you ever will. The logical work, that is going to be outsourced. It's gone. But what cannot be outsourced, what a machine cannot do, is dream. A machine cannot wake up with a melody in its head because it broke up with its girlfriend. A machine cannot look at a wine press and see a printing press because of a hunch. The future belongs to the creatives. It belongs to the dot connected. It belongs to the people who are brave enough to ask, what if, instead of just, what is? So, here is my challenge, and I want you to really take this serious. I want you to do something today that makes no sense. I want you to go out and collect a dot that scares you a little. If you are a tech guy, go take a pottery class. If you are an artist, go read a book about quantum mechanics. Go talk to someone who disagrees with you politically, not to argue, but just to see how their brain works. Treat people like puzzle pieces. When you see someone weird on the bus or the plane, don't put on your headphones. Lean in. Ask a question. How is this like that? Because, really, creativity is the only infinite resource we have. We can run out of oil. We can run out of land. But we can never run out of ideas as long as we keep colliding with it, as long as we keep the walls down. You have the machinery. You have the alpha states, the theta states, the dream state. You know that you need to protect that first hour of the morning. Please, for the love of physics, stop looking at your phone as soon as you open your eyes. Let your brain breathe. Let it work for you. And one last thing. It's kind of important. If you found a little spark here, if something in this rambling clicked, then you are probably one of us. You are a dot collector, and we need more of you. So, do me a favor. Down below, there is a button that says subscribe. Click it. Not because I need the numbers. Well, maybe I do. But because you need the reminder. You need to be around other people who are asking these questions. And leave a comment. Tell me, what is one weird thing you are going to do this week to crack your cocoon? I really want to know. Now, go. Go collect some dots. The world is waiting for your next idea, and it better be a good one. See you next time.